Welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Mod MattHe, and I have with me today on the sofas
Mod Moltare.
Or as you shall be known for this, Professor Moltare, I think.
Oh, really?
Really?
Am I still Professor Moltare?
Professor
I thought that was just for the video.
No, we're going to use it for this as well.
Okay.
Because today you're going to teach Invention 101.
Listen up, class.
There are marks. I actually have a piece of paper in front of me, by the way, listeners, with marks required for each part of this discussion to make sure he gets all the points.
I set the exam schedule myself.
He did. So if he gets it wrong, you can tally him off on Twitter or on the forums.
They will do both, inevitably.
Yes, I am sure. So let's start with jargon busting.
Oh, yes.
I want some definitions, explained in brief, please.
Okay.
For different features of the skill. And we're going to start with disassembly.
Disassembly. Disassembly is the act of taking stuff that you don't need out of your bank, or that you've just bought on the GE for the express purpose, or that's dropped off of something you've killed, and rendering it down into materials that you then use in the rest of Invention.
Okay.
Which also gets you a small amount of experience.
Okay. We'll come back to disassembly later.
I'm sure we will.
This is just a brief jargon now.
Yes.
Materials, parts, and components.
Right. Materials.
Yes.
The general term for any bits that you get from disassembling stuff that you can then use to build other things in Invention.
Right.
They're split into parts that you get commonly.
Yep.
And components which are more rare and used in generally more powerful applications.
Right. Okay, so if I slay the cake monster...
definitely slay the cake. Always slay the cake monster.
Right, and I get the blancmange prize.
Yep.
And I disassemble it.
Yep.
It might disassemble into a common thing, which are marshmallows.
Yep.
And it might disassemble into some rarer things, which are jelly tots.
Well, let's attach the terms to them in situ so that we can see the context.
Right.
If you disassemble the blancmange that is dropped, you will probably get lots of organic parts.
Right.
And a few culinary components.
Right, okay. Okay.
Will that do?
Yeah, that'll do.
Excellent.
Right. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so next piece of jargon. Are you ready for this one? This is a biggie, I think.
Okay.
Devices, augmentors, which is a great word.
Oh, thank you.
And gizmos.
Right. Devices are things that you make with your materials that have some effect in the game world. So, cyborg chinchompers. I don't think we're calling them cyborg anymore. They're probably enhanced chinchompers.
Right.
That you've taken a chinchomper and you've taken a bunch of invention parts or components.
Yep.
And you've put them together using your invention skill, and now you've got a better chinchomper that does more damage.
Hooray.
Woodcutting, mining, and fishing accumulators are also devices.
Okay.
You build them, they're like anti-urns. If you fail to fish up a fish, your fishing accumulator charges. When it's full, teleported away, nice chunk of experience.
Oh, lovely.
So it's a bit of bad luck protection for mining, fishing, woodcutting. Okay. And those are examples of devices.
Okay. And
augmentors are things that you can build and then apply to a weapon or a piece of torso or leg armor or a shield. And doing so turns that weapon into an improved version of itself that you can level up in combat by using it.
Yep.
And that you can put specific perks into, which we'll come back to in a little
minute.
while.
That's the next piece of jargon.
And the way you do that is by adding gizmos to them.
Hooray!
Gizmos are, again, you build them with your invention parts and components, and then you use more parts and components to experiment and find effects that those gizmos can then impart to whatever you socket them into.
Right, okay.
Whichever augmented item you happen to put them in will get those benefits.
Okay. And so we come to perks.
Perks are generally mechanical effects that you can find elsewhere in the game. Some you can't, but take, for example, the Saradomin War Priest set effect that occasionally reduces the damage you take by 90%, 99%. Depends on the number of pieces of the set. There is a perk that has a similar but slightly lesser effect So equivalent to wearing, say, 3 pieces of War Priest.
Yeah.
If you socket that into your augmented weapon, then carrying that weapon will confer that effect on you, that perk. So you will have a chance to take much reduced damage from an attack. And there's a range of perks to discover.
Yes. And we're not allowed to discuss all of them yet, are we?
I'm not willing to talk about what too many of them do, no.
Okay. I do know that one of them that I saw when I was testing it the other day...
Spoilers.
...made me hurt a lot if I went and fought something.
Yes.
Yes. And that's as much as I'm going to say. That was not a perk you want very often.
No.
Oh,
I think we have already mentioned the dragon bait, demon bait,
yes,
and undead bait perks, which, yes, it is worth mentioning, not all perks are positive.
Yes.
Some of them will give you malices rather than bonuses.
Yes.
And are best avoided, except in as much as you get experience for making them.
Okay. I'm going to give you 8 out of 10 for that section.
Oh, it's not bad.
Not too bad.
I mean, it's still a first.
If you're on that kind of grading, I think that's probably a B minus. Maybe.
If you're in America.
B plus. Okay. So if I've got 80 smithing, crafting, and divination, what is my first step to start on the pioneering trail of invention?
Well, the very first thing to do is to get yourself to the Falador lodestone.
Right.
And head a little way north and a little way east to where you will see a lovely stone archway with the invention symbol on the door. And that is the new Inventors Guild that essentially you'll be helping to bring into prominence, take into the light, and further in this glorious 6th age of man.
Okay.
6th age, in which there are mans and womans. Inside, you will find a fellow who essentially will take you through a tutorial for invention that will introduce all of these lovely terms that I just defined.
A friendly chap.
He is a very friendly chap. He needs some help, though, because he would like to combine smithing and crafting in some way to take it forward into the glorious technological future.
But doesn't know how.
But he doesn't know how. He's missing that one sort of spark, that Guthix juice of inspiration.
Yes.
And he'll lead you through a tutorial that will introduce you to all of those concepts and end you up with some starting off materials and some bits and pieces. Actually,
that was one of the things I noticed you missed on your jargon list, Professor. You missed the word inspiration. Is that not another piece of jargon we should be familiar with?
Inspiration certainly is another term within the skill. When you need to make a new thing that you've never made before you can do that, you need to discover it.
Right.
You need to find out how to make it. And that involves spending some inspiration on it. Now, inspiration you get when you level up the skill, and you can also get from just day-to-day activities. You can be fishing and be hit by a bolt of inspiration, and you can kill a thing, and that'll give you some inspiration as well.
Okay.
And,
so going about your daily tasks helps you find greater inspiration to achieve more in the Invention Guild.
Yep. And in each case, you choose what you'd like to unlock with that inspiration.
Right.
You do a brief sort of micro puzzle, really, to most efficiently spend your inspiration on unlocking it.
Okay.
And then it's yours to make or use, or there's any number of things that you can unlock in this manner.
So it's quite worth your time, in fact, spending a little bit of time on that micro puzzle, isn't it?
Yes,
because it does make quite a difference overall.
Yeah, there is no way you can lock yourself out of getting everything eventually.
Yeah.
But if you're spendthrift with your inspiration, then you might find that you have to work a little harder later on to catch up.
Okay. So back to the tutorial.
Yes.
So we're running through the tutorial. We're going to help this little chap find the inspiration. How do we do that?
I don't want to spoil too much.
Right, okay.
Because obviously Mod Stu has done an excellent job of weaving it into the story of how the guild comes to be.
Right, okay.
But certainly it involves introducing the concept of disassembly, the concept of blueprints, the concept of devices, and everything's introduced one after another.
Running through the jargon we've just talked about and making sure you're aware of how it all works and interchanges.
Running through in hopefully logical steps how it all works.
Okay. And when I've done my tutorial, how do I train it? Sorry, I should give you a mark for that. So
Please do, yes.
7.5 out of 10.
I blame the distractions.
Yes. So I've got the tutorial done. How do I now train it? And this is a big section.
It is.
Because this is worth 15 marks.
Oh, wow. So there is some XP to be had from disassembling items.
Right.
However, I would like to reassure all of Reddit and most of Twitter that you don't have to just disassemble 2 million dragon longswords at 16 experience each to get your 99.
No.
It is not meant to be the primary method of training invention to go disassembling things.
It is a bonus.
It's a little bonus. It's a reflection of the philosophy that we've got, particularly these days, that if you do something that's related to a skill, you should probably get some experience in that skill.
Yeah.
So it is small dribs and drabs, but enough to make it worth your while gaining the materials as well as then spending them.
Yeah.
And obviously that's where the majority of it then comes from, is spending those materials to create the devices that you've unlocked, whether that be enhanced chinchompers or anything else. Every time you make a device, you'll get experience for it. That's no different from any other crafting skill.
Yeah.
Very familiar, uses MakeX, the system that smithing and crafting and so forth all use. So far, so normal. As I briefly mentioned earlier, making perks is a good source of experience.
Right.
The way this works, in very brief, is that you create a device called a gizmo shell.
Yeah.
Which has 5 slots to put in different materials. And so you can load it up with 2 organic components, 2 strong components, and a sharp part. And it'll tell you, here's the range of potential perks you could make with this combination of materials.
Yeah.
And then if you think that you like that list, you hit the button and it gives you a completed gizmo with those perks baked into it.
Okay.
And it gives you some invention experience for every material you've used up by doing that.
Right, okay.
Components, obviously being rarer, are worth more than parts, which are more common.
Yeah.
If you find and use the most rare of components, the ones that only come from particular places, they are worth even more.
Right, okay.
So
that makes sense.
Obviously, if you go disassembling your third age druidic,
yes,
you can expect some return on investment. I don't know if people would consider it enough return on investment to actually go disassembling their third age druidic,
but
there is at least an effort made along those lines.
Yeah. Okay.
I probably wouldn't disassemble third age druidic.
Don't disassemble your third age druidic. Don't.
There's better choices.
Yes.
So that's a good way to both find out what sort of perks you might get for any given combination of stuff, and also to do some leveling, do some training.
Okay.
The 4th and 5th methods, because they are of a kind, once you have created an augmented weapon or piece of armor or shield, using it in combat will give experience to it. It will be able to gain levels.
Okay.
Up to the 10th level of that equipment, and that will take a little while.
Yeah.
Each level will increase the amount of invention XP that's contained inside that weapon.
Okay.
So by the time you get to level 10, disassembling that weapon will then give you a nice big chunk of invention XP.
Right, okay.
As well as all the other benefits that leveling up a weapon grants it. So there's things like when you disassemble it, it'll give you 4 times the unique materials it would have done. It'll give you more of any given thing. It'll consume less of your charge in any given weapon. It'll just become better and more valuable as you use it. If, however, you decide that you don't want to lose that weapon, because you've augmented all of your Drygors and they represent a good chunk of your bank, as they do for many. There is another alternative. You can create a device that is definitely not called the XP Sucker Outerer. We've got a better name for it than that. I just can't remember it.
I really hope you have, because that's
It is shocking. We've called it something like the Siphon or similar.
Yes. Because that's a scary name.
It is.
The XP Sucker Outerer.
The XP Sucker Outerer. But that's what it does. It sucks the XP out of the augmented weapon, and it gives you the invention XP that a weapon 2 levels below it would have given you, but without destroying the weapon. Yeah. So destroy a level 10 weapon and you might get, let's say, 300,000 experience. Use the XP Sucker Outerer on it and you might get half that as fitting a level 8 weapon.
Yep.
But you'll get to keep the weapon, which will now be at level 0, and level it up again and go around again.
Okay, so if you've got a favourite weapon, you can just keep on that cycle.
So yeah, that's possibly the most GP efficient way of doing so.
Okay.
It's probably not the most time efficient way of doing so.
No.
So those are the major ways of getting invention XP.
Okay. So I am going to give you 14 out of 15 for that section. Very good. Very impressed. Okay. Making perks. So that's something you probably need to tell us more about. More information about making perks.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the underlying systems.
Okay.
Not in any sort of numerical detail because spoilers.
Yeah.
But I'm a systems designer.
That's all lovely juice for players to find.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there will be spreadsheets existing of this not long after launch because our players are nothing if not dedicated.
Yep.
In essence, any given material in Invention has a bunch of potential perks that it can give you and a weighting for how likely they are to give you levels of that perk. So a common part, let's say heavy parts, that you can get from practically anywhere, might have 3 positive perks and 3 negative perks that you can get out of them, making your attack slower, making you do more damage, all that sort of thing. And it'll contribute different amounts to a gizmo that you put it in.
Yeah.
It's balanced such that if you put 5 of the same component in a given gizmo, what you're likely to get is 1 slightly positive perk and 1 quite negative perk.
Okay.
You'll get the experience for making it, obviously, but you won't end up very likely with something that you want to keep.
Yeah.
To get the really good perks without any of the negatives, what you're going to want to do is experiment a bit with putting in a couple of these and a couple of these, with putting in, finding which combinations emphasize the one perk that you do want without bolstering the perks that you don't.
Yeah.
So you want perks that that are shared by 2 different materials that don't also share other perks.
Yeah.
So it really is all about experimenting. It's about that choice of what you put in to any given gizmo shell and finding out where the best routes to go down are to try to get any given perk, and indeed finding out which perks those are on any given material.
So what you're telling me is invention is about inventing.
Yeah, that there is a certain amount of potential to discover.
Brilliant.
And that will only grow over time as we add more materials, more perks for those materials to have. And there's been talk about occasionally shaking it up a bit.
Okay.
Changing what perks are available from what materials. Whether or not that comes to pass soon, I don't know. I'd like to give people some time to figure out what's going on before I pull the rug from under their feet. I think that's only polite. But certainly it's a framework that we can build on as we add additional perks and as more areas of content link into the invention skill.
Okay. I'm going to give you full marks for that section.
Lovely.
That's got me quite excited about that skill. So next, I'd like you to tell me about specialization.
Specialization is something that we've really laid the groundwork for in this first launch.
Okay.
That when you start Invention, you have access to a set of blueprints that we call the common or basic tech tree. that are based purely on Guthix energy, smithing, crafting, just sort of core components of the skill.
Yeah.
When you reach a slightly higher level, we'll give you the opportunity to specialize into a particular tech branch.
Okay.
That brings with it its own set of additional blueprints, additional stuff to discover.
Yeah.
Now, initially on launch, there'll be 2 of those. They are Dwarven and Goblin technology.
Okay.
Dwarves obviously very much into the heavy industry, the steam, bronze and all that sort of thing. Sticking a cog on it, always a good plan.
Brass punk.
Brass punk, yeah. Goblin technology is very much based on electricity, high voltage, Van de Graaff generators and Jacob's ladders and all that sort of thing. And obviously these are reflected in the sorts of things that you can then build when you specialize into one or the other techs. Now, again, because of the way RuneScape is, the way we want it to be, that doesn't mean that you'll never get the stuff in the other tech tree. It just means that you'll have to wait longer for any given unlock. So, let's say you specialize into Goblin tech, then perhaps in the Dwarven tree, something that you would have got at level 20, you'll now get at level 40. Eventually, you'll have everything. It's just an amount of choice over what things you get in what order and how soon. As I said, again, at the moment, it's a framework. There's 2 tech trees. There's a couple of things in each tech tree. We'll expand upon that over time. We'll add more things to those tech trees. We'll add more tech trees in the future as well.
Okay. And we've said, the last question of the paper, we've said invention is a theme for the year. What does that mean? There's 5 marks available for this question. It's going to be key to your passing.
Oh dear. I mean, we first mentioned this at RuneFest, I believe, that we wanted this to be a theme that ties bits of content together throughout the year.
Yeah.
So the way it immediately becomes relevant to me as a designer is the Guardians team upstairs are working on the next Vampire quest.
Yeah.
And can we find some way that completing that quest gives you access to more invention-themed items? So maybe you can disassemble blisterwood weapons into unique vampiric components that have their own set of perks attached that you can't find elsewhere.
Right.
Or that you can only find very rarely and with a huge amount of luck elsewhere. It means adding new devices to other bits of content as they come out. It means using invention as a platform on which we can build reward.
Yeah.
It was a problem that we identified towards the latter half of the year before last, that our reward space, how much we could give the player for completing things, was starting to run dry.
Yeah.
That really, there would come a point where there'd be nothing left to give people because absolutely everything in the game had bonuses applied to it and so forth.
Yeah.
So part of why Invention came about was to give a space into which we can add reward for content that is relevant in an ongoing manner, that doesn't become obsolete in the way, say, a maple tree might.
Right, okay.
So part of our plan for the year is then to expand Invention both through external content like quests and minigames that we might make elsewhere, and through later on expanding it with the Guild of Inventors, the machines that we wanted to put in there and had to cut. If we can get those in while we've got more time, then so much the better. So it becomes in itself, and as a resource for other content, a space to build.
Awesome. Okay, I've totted up your marks. I have you at 43.5 out of 50. Which is 87%.
87%.
So I'll give you an A for that.
Oh.
Well done. I have one more question left
Grading on
for
a
you.
curve, clearly.
Clearly. Like experience with RuneScape, it's always grading on a curve.
Oh, yes.
One last question before you leave our sofa today and go back to the Invention Mills. What's your favourite perk? Without spoiling it, obviously. What perk is your favourite?
My favourite perk is one that I really don't want to mention because it's just hilarious when you encounter it. So instead, I'm going to have to go with my second favourite perk, which is the Brassican perk,
Right.
which every now and again adds a cabbage to your inventory.
Okay.
It's not a positive perk.
No.
I'll emphasise that. It's not something that you necessarily want to take with you when fighting the Queen Black Dragon.
But it has its humour.
But it is something that you might run across. It's quite easy to get if you use the right combination of materials, and I think various people had some fun with it as well.
Yes, I would imagine so. Well, thank you, Professor Moltare, for coming down to the sofas and giving us your Invention 101.
Oh, thank you for the exam, MattHe.
And look forward to seeing it in game.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye-bye.